I'm Dustin Grinnell, and this is Curiously. Every writer gets the same questions, usually from someone who means well. Where do you get your ideas? How long does it take to write a book? How much money do you actually make? But there's one question that hits different, especially when it comes from other writers. Can writing really be taught? As if talent were a fixed trait. You either have it or you don't. And yet every year, thousands of writers pack up their manuscripts, their half-finished novels, their dog-eared notebooks, and enroll in MFA programs in creative writing to find out. Inside those programs, something strange and specific happens. You sit in a room, you put your work on the table, and then the people around that table, your professors, your peers, take it apart. Sentence by sentence, scene by scene. They question your choices, challenge your instincts, and hand it back to you with the expectation that you'll make it better. I know this rhythm because I lived it. I did my MFA in fiction writing, and two writers I met there were Sam Cooke and Martin Smith. We were in the trenches together. The workshops, the readings, the late-night arguments about whether a story's premise actually works. We also saw the rest of it. The posturing, the virtue signaling, the bureaucratic absurdities. The moments when the whole enterprise felt less like artistic training and more like an elaborate social experiment. In this episode, Sam, Martin, and I pull back the curtain on all of it. Whether you're considering an MFA, already in one, or simply curious about what happens when a room full of writers tries to teach and sometimes outdo each other, this one's for you. So I'm here with Sam Cooke and Martin Smith. We are gathered here today because we each have a master's in fine arts and creative writing, and we all went to the same program. Today we're going to talk about the pros and cons. We're going to share some stories, give you a real sense of what the experience is actually like. So we all met in the same small Boston-based low residency MFA program. So it's kind of a reunion. We're getting the band back together. Martin is in Pennsylvania. He's calling in from the phone. He's in the cloud right now. And Sam Cooke is here in studio. So before we kind of get into the conversation, 30 seconds or less, why don't you give listeners a quick 30-second intro as to who you are and what you write. Sam Cooke, you go first.
Yeah, my name is Sam Cooke, born and raised in Florida, been up here ever since. I write primarily fiction for young adults and children. The thing I'm working on right now, though, is actually adult fiction. So that is something new to get my feet wet. Also have some plays, musicals in my back pocket as well.
So I am here in Chester, Pennsylvania by way of Tennessee, where I grew up. I was in the same program as Sam at our low residency MFA. We both did writing for children and adults and young adults. I did picture books mostly, but most of my work right now is in nonfiction. I'm working on a book right now about the band Metallica, which has been a lot of fun. You know, I also teach writing here at a couple universities in New Jersey, and that's that.
All right. The perfect group to talk about an MFA program. So, basic terms, Sam or Martin, either of you can take this one. For the lay listener, what is an MFA in writing, and why would somebody get one of those?
I can tell you why I chose to get an MFA. It was the quickest path to a terminal degree that would allow me to teach. As you guys know, I'm a father of two, and at the time my kids were still in high school, and I was prepping for them to go to college. And as much as I wanted to do a PhD in some kind of writing or history discipline, the MFA was my route to get into the classroom quicker. Now, an MFA, in writing was basically just focused on craft. That's the main intention of an MFA. You're supposed to focus on craft, focus on, how you're going to come up with words. Because if you've made it to that point, it's pretty well determined you have a pretty creative mind and you know how to write. It's about fine-tuning everything. At least that's what the experience is supposed to be. Now, what it ends up being, I think, for a lot of people is a networking opportunity. They say, in college and grad school, a lot of what it is who you meet. And to a point, that's true as well, but I think that takes just as much focus as the actual work on craft itself.
The three of us went to what's called a low residency program. Sam, why don't you lay out what's the difference between a low residency program and, not a full-time program in writing?
Yeah, so a low residency program, you're going to have the flexibility to do the majority of your work at home. You attend like twice a year, like a 10-day in-person residency and workshop with your classmates. And then the rest of the semester, you're working one-on-one with a mentor through like packet exchanges and assignments. Most of it is like creative writing back and forth with your mentor. It's a really good opportunity, and it's why I did it if you are working full-time or even if you're working part-time, because you know that you have just those 2 10-day periods where you need to be in person, and you can do the rest of the work from anywhere. Like I lived in New York City at the time and would travel up to Boston for those 2 residencies, and then the rest of the time I was working in New York City. So yeah, I think for someone who is working full-time or just has other things going on, the low residency it was a really great option, and it really fit into my life at the time.
Yeah, and we should say that getting an MFA in creative writing, isn't just fiction. It's creative nonfiction, which could be essays and literary journalism. You can also get a MFA in poetry, graphic novels. And our program, like many MFA programs, is kind of a mixture of all of them. And even in fiction, I was in the adult fiction writing program, and Sam and Martin were in the young adult fiction program. So we all mix together for those 10-day residencies, one in the winter, one in the summer. And it's kind of a hoot. You're spending time with everybody who loves the thing that you love to do. And you get together for classes on craft, for a workshop to study pages, and for readings. And the last thing I would say in response to Sam's comment is that those packet exchanges that happen when you're not at school are usually 20 pages of work for fiction writers. So basically you need to come up with 5 times 20, you need to come up with that amount of material to send to your teacher while you're away.
Yeah, I remember my first residency. I remember someone saying, like, don't be fooled. Like, just because it's low residency doesn't mean it's not a lot of work. And I started the program with several other people. And by the time we actually graduated, there were only 4 of us because other people had been like, it's too much work. I can't balance it with my everyday life responsibilities. So the other thing is, like, you really have to carve out the time in your life to do the work, because I guess the benefit of a full in-person MFA program would be like, that's all you have to focus on. Whereas like the low residency, like that's all you have to focus on for those 10 days at a time. And then good luck. You have to like make it work for the rest of the year while you're away.
Now, Martin, what about you? Because you're a prolific writer with books under your belt before you even started this program. So I imagine the pages wasn't hard for you to produce. So what were you kind of hoping? Like, you didn't have to teach yourself how to write and produce. So why for you go into this program having already, you've achieved a certain level of mastery over the craft?
I wouldn't call it mastery. I mean, I still think today I kind of muddle along as a writer. I mean, that's high praise and I'm grateful for it. But again, for me, the biggest aspect of it is that I wanted to teach other people to write. And I was already an adjunct by the time I enrolled in the program. I was teaching at a couple of institutions in and around Pennsylvania, in the Philadelphia area, but I could never go past that level of adjunct without a terminal degree. And being low residency and me being a parent and me, teaching part-time and writing everything that I wrote and everything else, the low residency aspect gave me the ability to still be prolific in my writing, but to have a sort of editorialize on it. I was going to say for free, but as we all know, that program was not free. But to give me a chance to have eyes of people that understood craft and learning how to better craft, if that makes sense. So that was kind of the focus for me. Was first off, obviously, the credentials so that I could teach, but I was in an area with other writers where I was going to get feedback, and it was going to be real feedback too. as we talked about before, Sam and I were in the same, writing for young children and young adults program. And Sam was a wonderful fountain of knowledge when it came to feedback. And that's the kind of people that you need in that kind of low residency program. So again, the flexibility for what I was going for, it worked out, pretty well for me.
Let's talk about feedback. So feedback, what you were saying was someone reading your work and giving, notes, feedback on your work through what's called workshop. So I think this is probably a good time to talk about workshop because that's kind of like the beating heart of an MFA program. That's what you're doing for those, 3 hours each of the 10 days. And that's what really is tiring. It's demanding. What are we doing there for someone who doesn't know anything about it?
Workshop starts before the residency. You submit I think it was 20 to 25 pages at a time. You submit that, it gets emailed to everybody in your cohort. So like Martin said, he and I were in the same genre study. So we were receiving, I think at the peak of our program, we were receiving 7 packets of 20 to 30 pages each. So you go into workshop with the expectation that you've read of your classmates' submissions, you've made thoughtful comments, notes, questions, feedback. And then how our group did it was there were 2 people that would go a day and you would just sit there and let's say that they're workshopping my piece. I just sit there in silence while everyone is oh, I really liked this or oh, this didn't make sense at all. And so I have a background in professional theater. So receiving and giving feedback is part of who I am. It's how I grew up. I could imagine for someone who's not used to hearing critiques or even praise about your work, it could be a very jarring few days until you get used to it. And then you get used to it and you're cool. And you sort of also learn I always value everything Martin says, but then you're going to get some feedback that you're yeah, okay, I'll put that in my back pocket and not do anything with it.
It's always a mixed bag. And feedback's tough because it's just you're sitting there in front of the firing squad waiting to see which gun has the bullet. And sometimes there's, as dark as it sounds, there's a bullet that you need. And then to Sam's point, there's some people where it's just why are you in this program? Not to be negative, but I mean, there were people that in our program that I'm just surprised even survived the first semester. Workshop's tough. It's intense. It's designed to be that because you're getting feedback from people that can't bullshit you when it comes to what you're learning and what you're getting across. These are people that know the craft. These are people that are learning the exact same things that you are learning, and they're your peers. So it's a great environment if it's led properly. And I think Sam and I were fortunate enough to have several workshop leaders in our program that were really good at leading workshop, but it's an entirely different experience than anything else in academia.
Yeah. It's where the rubber meets the road. You put something down on paper, and you really find out is it clear, is it engaging, and what you get is, like you said, craft level feedback. When you send work to your mom or dad or friends, they say, "Oh, I liked the ending," or "I really liked this character." It's not craft feedback. Let's just give some examples of what people say in workshop that actually makes your work better. I said once, Martin, you and I were in workshop, and I said, when workshop's really working for me, it's when I say to myself, "Oh, I didn't think of that." Because so much of creative writing is you have to be neurotic with your work. Oh, is that sentence clear? Or, oh, is that dialogue ringing true? Did I open in an engaging way? Is that character multidimensional, whatever? And you just can't think of everything. So you get a bunch of people to kind of weigh in and say, that doesn't sound right, or I'm not sure what you meant there. I'm confused and stuff like that. So it helps you. It points out things that you can't think of everything.
I think also sometimes the aha moments wouldn't even be in workshop. It would be we're leaving workshop and we're all walking to lunch and we're still talking about someone's story. And then one of us oh, you know what? I just solved the problem for you. And those are the moments. I think for me, one of my best memories was my first semester. The manuscript that I was working on had this huge plot twist at the end. And when I shared it, everybody in the group was like, there's no way that's going to work. And I was like, no, it will. And for the rest of my time in that program, 2-year program, as I was like working on this manuscript, I was writing other stuff on the side too. I remember my graduation residency, one of our mentors, one that all three of us shared, David Yu, shout out David Yu, he's the best. He was like, you know what? It did work. You were right. And so I think it's just like, that's like a good example of like, you're going to get feedback that, like you said, some of it you might be like, oh shit, yeah, you are right. But then you kind of have to like stick to your story and like not let the fact that you're having 14 sets of eyes on your work at all times.
There's an old saying in the South that there's certain types of people that can tell you to go to hell in a way to make you look forward to the trip, so to speak. And to heap more praise on David Yu, David wasn't that. David was the kind of person that could tell you how to get to hell, and you wouldn't even be realizing that you're getting directions to hell. David, is a very blunt person, but he does not withhold his praise when something's right. I remember the greatest compliment the man ever gave me was that he looked at me and he said, I was able to suspend my disbelief for about 5 minutes reading this. And as you guys know, as people that are in this kind of craft, that's the hardest thing to do. We are taught to critically analyze every word that we read. And for a lot of times, it takes a lot of fun out of a lot of media. But when you can get into something that takes that suspension of disbelief and gives it back to you, that's the kind of feedback that really is what guides you along the way. And David was great at it. So were a lot of our other mentors and a lot of the other students too. But it takes a certain hand to lead a workshop, and it takes a certain way to work to be an active participant in a workshop. So it's a skill in and of its own.
Yeah, some teachers were more heavy-handed than others. And it does take a light touch. One thing that I remember the director of our program saying once is she said, sometimes you learn more from hearing other people's work being workshopped than your own. And I remember that happened to me a few times. Like someone made a comment about someone's sci-fi story and they say the setting could have been better. There could have been like more world building. And I thought to myself, oh, my story could use a little bit more of that too. So that's an interesting thing that happens in workshop. It's like you're always listening, you're always learning. Martin, you said, let's not hold back here. You said that sometimes you're sitting across from someone's work, you've read their work, and you're kind of like, it's not really that good. That's okay. In some cases, it's just how we learn. Or maybe they didn't really put in enough effort or whatever. So what happens in the workshop when you're reading something that's just not good? And how do you constructively talk about it?
Honestly, I don't. And Sam can attest to this. When we were in the workshop, and Sam knows exactly who I'm talking about, but there would be times when we're reading this person's work. You can't follow it. The plot doesn't make sense.
Sure do.
It's somebody trying to make themselves into a character in a story, which can work if you're the guy that wrote Gatsby Fitzgerald. But when you have a dull, boring life and you write in a dull, boring style, there's no fixing that. So I tend to disengage with those works. It didn't happen often, I'll be honest. I mean, it goes both directions, too. You also tend to disengage from bad feedback, and boy, I could tell you some stories there. But it's a slog. You find a way to say one or two nice things about it, and you get ready to focus on the works that people wrote that you're truly passionate about. I mean, and that's just as blunt as I can be about it. I'm not going to waste time on something that did not put forth the time and effort to deserve my attention. My time is valuable, even though I'm paying for this program just like you. I have something of value to offer you. If you don't have anything to offer me, I'm not going to engage.
I think also in workshop, like there can be a common misconception where you feel like you have to say something just to say something, and you just don't. Like, I'm not saying like if someone's work is, it could be on the opposite end where it's like so good that all you want to do is talk about it. But like, I find that in workshop, my approach to it was, number one, is this feedback going to be something that like not only benefits this person's story, but other people could take from. I remember I got a piece of feedback once in workshop, and it was like, I just can't understand why the author is writing about Florida and they talk about a plastic bag.
Because there's, less plastic bag? Like, what was that comment grounded in?
Don't know. That was an example of like, okay, are you just talking to hear yourself talk? Or like, and with workshop too, like I should have mentioned, you have the opportunity to like give the other person your written or typed out notes. So like you can go through bullet by bullet and share with everybody like everything you thought about it. Or you could pick those pieces of feedback that are either starting a conversation or something that is a bigger topic that other writers in the room can benefit from.
Sam, you said once you were in workshop and there was someone sharing, where you were reading someone's work, and somewhere in the prose it said like develop this further or something, or like it was like an outline. Like they essentially hadn't written that section, but which is like, I can't imagine anything more like insulting to faculty members and students. You got to write it.
Well, yeah. And I think also like I approached it as like, okay, I know these pages they do need some work because this isn't a final draft. I want to put forward like my most final draft possible to people before they're giving me feedback. Because if someone has all these holes and they're like, I don't know, I think I need to go back to that later. How are we supposed to help you? Also, like from a like teacher or like developer point of view. So I don't know. I think like Martin said, like you can really tell who like really locked in and was like, I want to put my best foot forward. I want to like take this feedback. I like value the time, the opinions of the people that are in the room with me. And then you could also always get the hint of like, oh, you remembered Wednesday night that our packets were due Thursday by noon. And you maybe just threw things together.
So we talked about David Yu. There are other really fantastic teachers from our program. Someone who had a big impact on me was Sandra Schofield, and she actually just retired. They should hang her jersey up in the rafters. This is an awesome literary writer and writer of some nonfiction craft books as well. Yeah. What were they? What are they? But she was hardcore. She was hardcore though. She would never hold back. She took the gloves off, but it was good. You needed it. She would always hit me right between the eyes, and I was ready for it.
Yeah, I think so. I actually chose our program because of one of the mentors that was in mine and Martin's, and that was Brendan Kiley, who is, if you're a YA reader, he is very well respected in the YA genre. And so that's why I chose the program.
You were like fangirl.
I was fangirl. But I think like Martin and I, we were really lucky. Like our workshops, I never felt, Martin, I hope you can agree, I never felt that I was like, oh, this was a waste of a bus ticket to Boston, or like this was a waste of my morning. Like I could have been in that dining hall eating some scrambled eggs. But I felt like we had like very attentive workshop leaders. It did get to a point in our genre specifically where I was the only person left because everyone else had graduated. And so then I just got like punted to back and forth between groups. So that was an interesting experience. But I feel like overall, my workshop experience was very positive.
I agree 100%. And I'll toss a couple of other names out there. I worked with Renee Watson, who recently just won her second Newbery honor and won the actual full award this time. So congratulations to Renee. Absolutely fantastic mentor. Brilliant literary mind. Laura Williams McCaffrey was also fantastic. I worked with Laura 3 times between my MFA and my postgraduate certificate. And when you have people that are leading workshop that know how to workshop and are they put the same amount of passion into the work that's given to them, if that makes sense. It's an incredible experience. And then, there's, I'm not going to mention names, but there's other ones, that you don't work so well with, and that's fine too. That's part of it. It's never going to be perfect. But when workshop is done right, it is just magical.
Yeah. And you also hear, like, I remember before my first workshop, I was like, you mean I'm going to do this every day for 3 hours a day? And then I remember after the first one, like, it feels like you blink and it's over. And if you get into like the groove with your like cohort, I guess, it's almost like you're like, no, like, let's just keep talking. Like, let's go eat lunch together and like keep the conversations going. I found, like, Martin, I think that's how you and I became so close, that we were on the same wavelength of like how we wanted to work, what we wanted out of the program. Like, we have the same sort of like work ethic, if you will. So when you meet those people too, that I think makes as big of an impact as like having a successful workshop leader.
Yeah, I remember Sterling Watson was another writer and faculty member who I really loved working with. In fact, I asked him to look at work after the program. I still work with him. And it's great because he would keep the dream alive. You know, he gives me several pages of feedback and it's all very specific. It's all very, you know, might want to think about this, might want to think about that, might want to pair this, you know, and so on and so forth. It's really good to develop those relationships with faculty members and keep it going. I've emailed David Yu to this day. I don't bother him. It's twice a year. You know?
Yeah, he probably sees your name come up and he's like, God damn.
Because there's probably a million Dustins out there. You know, how many students has he had? He's not trying to like answer craft questions like all day, right? So you don't want to bother them. You don't want to be annoying. And that's a good thing to know too, because, you know, these are people, you know, they have time and you don't want to, you know, mess with their time, but you also want to, you know, check in with them. This is where my career is. This is what I'm working on. What are you working on?
Yeah. I think too, it gets to a point where like you're no longer like mentor mentee, and you, if you're lucky, you get to like look at each other as like not coworkers, but like in it together. I feel like when I got my first agent, I was like, gotta email Bemi. Like, gotta tell my people the good news. Because I feel like also we encountered so many people there that like they wanted you to succeed if you wanted it. Like they could tell. Like for me, I think why my experience was so positive is that everybody I encountered was like, oh, this chick wants this. Like this is her life. And so I think people pick up on that. And so when you succeed, it's like, it feels good for everybody.
Yeah, teachers know, they know when you're serious.
Yeah.
You know, they say, okay, there's a serious person, or at least they're taking it seriously. And the three of us are lifers. You know?
Yeah.
We got there and we were like in our element, you know? And I hadn't felt an energy like that in a long time. Like really, you know, because we're adults and we go to school again, but it was awesome. It was like a buzz.
It was like summer camp.
Yeah. It's like, oh man, you guys love this shit too?
And like summer camp too, like I shared a dorm room with someone my first residency.
Right, you stayed on campus.
On campus. Yeah. My bed was 10 feet away from a classmate's bed. For better or for worse. For better or for worse. We had a great time. And it was just like... And then I remember someone being like, you know, you can request a solo room, right? And I was like, yeah, this is the face of someone who knew that.
I tried to stay off campus one semester and the commute was just too much. So, but yeah, a solo room is an absolute necessity. It really is.
There was a bit of a dynamic that got set up though, because I was always a commuter. I lived 10 minutes away, right? So I just commuted in when everyone else stayed, you know, in the dorms. Means they ate 3 meals together, essentially. And I didn't always do that. So I always felt a little bit like an outsider. I would just kind of drop in and come in for the workshops and eat lunch with everybody and then like leave after the readings. So there was kind of like I was a little bit more of a ghost than everybody else. And there was a real thing going on there.
Yeah, I don't know though, because pretty much I felt like after the readings, most of the time everyone was, you're just wiped. Like you've been working all day, because what we haven't said is that like you have workshop in the morning and then you have like an hour to eat lunch and then you have craft classes in the afternoon. So like you're potentially like working from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. just on. And if like your social battery's like dead by the end of the day too. So it's also like, We did talk about you a lot, though.
Oh, yeah. You're like, so glad this guy's not in the room. Like, yeah.
Oh, yeah. We sure did. And the thing is, too, to go back to the readings, I mean, you would be done at 5 o'clock with workshops, but then you would step into those readings. And every time somebody was doing a reading, and these are some of the preeminent literary minds on the East Coast. I mean, there's some wonderful, faculty and staff that was in our program. They're bringing their A game to these readings, and a lot of this stuff is emotionally draining just to listen to. You're either belly laughing or you're sitting there in tears because of the value of work that they're bringing to the table. This experience, in a lot of ways, is physically and emotionally draining over 10 days, but it's one of those things where when you come out on the other end, you've gained a lot from it. You really have.
Yeah, that is such a good point. I like the readings, like you would think you're like, oh, cool, I'm just going to go like sit here for a few hours and just like disengage. But it's, first of all, the room was always 100 degrees. I don't know if anyone else felt that way, but I'm like dripping in sweat while also listening to these readings. But yeah, I think you have a great point that it was like physically exhausting because you're go, 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 but it's also like emotionally and mentally draining because you're like giving all you can to your classmates with the like acknowledgement and hope that they're also giving you all that they can. And then it's also like, I don't know, not that you want to like show off or like look good, but like you want to use those 10 days like to your advantage. Like you want to soak up everything possible. Like if someone's like, hey, do you want to go to this reading or like, do you want to go to the library? Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll have lunch with you. Yeah, let's do that. So it's go, go, go.
Right. A part of you wants to go home and just start revising. But Martin, you have something to say?
Well, and to that point, you're surrounded by so much good literature. And, that's a pretty basic way to put it, but it is what it is. It's good literature. You're surrounded by that much good writing. You can't help but start to turn out new ideas. And you're sitting there and you're like, I'm already exhausted and I've had to process all of this stuff and be emotionally invested in it. And then you'll be sitting there, oh, God, I've got this idea. I've got to put some of this down somewhere. I've got to write it down or put it in the notes on my phone or something like that. That's one of the great, I think in 10 days with the low residency program, if this is, this is probably one of the big pluses for me, you cannot help but capture more of a creative spark.
100%. Yep. I felt totally brimming with new ideas and I captured them all. And then some of them I'm working on to this day. Like 5 years from now, I still have a folder like that short story idea came from my program.
My second manuscript, I remember I like thought of the idea during one of the residencies and I like wrote the first chapter. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to close that and I will talk to that Word document in 6 months.
We got to get this on the record, Sam. At readings, okay, readings are what? They happen at like 5:30 p.m.
Or 6 even. It was like post-dinner.
They go, they're after dinner, 3 hours of workshop, 2 or 3 hours of craft classes, so you're pretty tired. But then what? They're like 4 readings, and they're each like what, 5 minutes to 10 minutes long?
Faculty, I felt like they were each like 20 minutes long.
Right. So you're sitting there and you've got to just like kind of like actively listen. Your mind's going in and out. Like sometimes I didn't even hear it because I'm tired. Maybe, I'm not a big into poetry. So the poems were like tough for me. It's all obviously like sparkling, brilliant stuff, but it's in some cases was just like my mind, I don't know what it is about my mind, but it's maybe too abstract or symbolic for me. I kind of want a story, So the like adult fiction usually was better for me. I really liked personal essays. I remember Vinnie Berry wrote an awesome essay about her bed, her mattress, and we were all just laughing. Yeah. We need to get this on record, Sam. We coined a term called a literary orgasm, and they happen in readings. And there's no FCC is not listening to this podcast episode, so we're fine. Sam, what is a literary orgasm? Right. So someone says something real profound.
That's it. Yeah. So someone says, and then she shut the door, and it wasn't just the house. She was shutting the door on her life. And someone's like,
Right. Like audibly, like, not to themselves. This is a public,
I think if it happened to me, I would maybe view it as a compliment. But as an audience member, it really takes you out of the moment. So my graduation was on Zoom because I was the class of COVID. So like your graduating semester, you get to do like a 20-minute reading of your work. So I don't even know if anyone literary orgasmed for my work. And that haunts me to this day because everyone was on mute on Zoom.
Oh, I did.
Thank you. Oh, yeah.
Why do you think I enjoyed workshops so much?
And then, of course, there's snapping, too. Okay, so someone says something that's really, they say something where the wind's blowing the right way. It's conventional wisdom. It's something like considered, I don't know, admirable or whatever. And the snaps would come and yikes. It didn't work. That was kind of embarrassing, but people love it, I guess.
You know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of the preachers at the altar, and he's going all hellfire and brimstone, preach about everything. And he would say, but the Lord Jesus loves you. And people would kind of go, oh, amen, and all that stuff. I mean, you're agreeing with the most obvious shit that's out there. And it's just like you want to get your name up there first as being on record as saying, oh, I believe that. Or, oh, I think that's good. Or, oh, I recognize the brilliance in that before anybody else did.
Yeah.
There was something that it was so effusive at times. People just like being like, oh my God, I was so moved by that. You could get up there and read The Great Gatsby, and I'll be like, yeah, that was awesome. I'm not going to snap. A single tear will not roll down my eye, I'm not going to, just enjoy it. Yeah. Like, why do you need to publicly display that you're admiring this piece of literature?
I think also something that readings really showcased was, you can get the words on the page and be a brilliant writer, but if you're not a brilliant reader or at least presenter of your work, some of that can get lost. And so I remember we did student readings, some of the student readings, seeing people so nervous or just not used to public speaking or even just reading their work aloud. You're like, come on, you can do it. It's going to be okay.
Martin, set up the student readings for us. What were those like, and orient someone who doesn't know what they are, and what was it like for you?
Most of the semester when we do student readings, you come in front of basically the entire cohort, your fellow classmates, people that are in a program. The alumni are usually there for some damn reason. That's the day that they decide to bring the alumni in. And you're taking a part of your work, which is usually somewhat polished, not always, because there's a couple of readings that I can make reference to that were about as polished as a turd. You get up there and you're reading it in 2 minutes, something that's supposed to summarize how great of a writer you are. Now, some people are just natural speakers. And some of us, like myself, have practiced in front of a classroom, so, we can slip into that voice. But most of the people that choose this as a profession, reserved by nature, they put their emotions out in words on a page, not in front of a group. So you would always get this weird mix of people that had no idea what they were doing, people that were terrified of what they were doing, and a couple of people that had some experience doing it. So you're watching these readings, and these people are coming through in rapid fire. You've got somebody on the side giving them time cues and everything else for when they're going to get cut off. It's really just a cluster. You end up getting some good readings out of it, but I never quite saw the purpose in the student readings as opposed to listening to mentors read. I guess it's for experience and stuff like that, but it was never enough to show you what it was going to actually be like doing a reading in public.
One student reading that I still think about to this day was Ellen, and she wrote something, the book ended up being published, but it was something about a deer or a moose?
Oh, no, it was a moose, and it had ticks on it. Yeah. And this is a real thing that's happening in the Northeast, in Maine and things like that. There's this overpopulation of ticks, and the ticks are just taking down moose. Yeah. And so she wrote this beautiful scene of basically a tick-infested moose. Yeah. And it was astonishing.
She's brilliant, yeah.
It was great. And then she did publish that book. Yeah. But man, you sat there and you're like, damn, you really put a spell on it.
So we had the range of that where here we are 6-7 years later even maybe.
We're talking about the tick-infested moose.
We're talking about the moose. But then you also have people that are up there and they're you're come on, go to therapy. this is not like your...
So it's tough because some people, Ellen was writing fiction, adult fiction. Yeah. Some people are writing essays, right? They're writing personal essays. So you are getting 2-minute readings of personal essays. And what is that? What is the subject matter? Obviously, it's mom, it's dad, it's the workplace, it's trauma.
Yeah.
And they just trauma bomb you.
It's hard too. I think that's like a common misconception on what like memoir and creative nonfiction is. Like, yes, I want you to like journal about your feelings, but at the end of the day, like people are not reading essays, memoir, creative nonfiction to like be down in the dumps with you. You have to connect it to something. And I think like going back to David I remember he taught a writing a personal essay class. And I remember like, I'm not a big nonfiction writer, but I remember walking away from that class being like, cool, I could probably write 2 or 3 essays that I could connect to a bigger subject. So
he really praised one of your stories. I was in that class, and you wrote a story about your sister pulling out like a cyst, like popping a cyst on you.
Yeah.
He loved that. He actually said, have you written essays before? And the subtext of that was do it more. Because what you did is you took all your fiction writing skills and you wrote a nonfiction story like it was fiction. So it really brought the reader into that story, and it was very propulsive.
Thank you. I think also
it was fantastic.
Oh, thanks, Martin.
What do they say? They say, make the particular general, make it universal. Like, don't just mire us in, like, don't make it navel gazing. Yeah. Don't make it narcissistic. Don't make it all about you. It's really, this is kind of like why you get an MFA, because you have to be reminded that, like, you have readers. People are going to read your work, and they're going to put it down if they don't like it. There needs to be something in there for them. Like, don't waste their time, And that's craft, but it's also subject matter. And sometimes subject matter graded on you, or the way it was treated. It's all about treatment.
Yeah, I think also like personal essays specifically, I'm fine if I'm like, oh, I don't have that experience. But if it's good writing or if it's entertaining, like that can sometimes be enough for me.
Yeah. Anything else on that, Mark?
Yeah, there's a story that I really want to bring up, and you guys will remember this instantly once I bring it up. There was somebody in a cohort that graduated. They do graduate readings as well as the readings that you do in front of everybody else. And this particular person was not in poetry, okay? They were not a poet by any measure. But they started their reading with this kind of S&M bondage tribute poem to their significant other.
Yeah.
And we're sitting there in front of everybody at graduation, and we're all wondering what in the blue hell is going on because we did not sign up for this. And it's one of those things where that is such and look, far be it for me as somebody that's published smut to say that there's no room for smut literature. There absolutely is. But when you're just telling something to yourself and you're writing a story for an audience of one, and then you're getting out there and you have the gall to put that just out there for that person while we're all sitting here waiting for you to get to the point, that's not good writing. Dustin, you said navel gazing. That's gazing of a whole different level. What audience are you writing for at that point? What are you trying to prove? That you can get away with it? Okay, you got away with it. Who cares?
Yeah, I think there's some things that like I would write in my journal that I keep under my pillow, and then some things that I would want on the bookshelf. And it is okay if those are not the same. I will say I think the MFA program sort of like gives you permission to like write in a genre you've never written in before. Dustin, I'm similar to you where like I have no interest in poetry. I don't like reading it. I don't really enjoy writing it. But I remember taking a poetry class and being like, oh, cool. I can adapt and apply some of the things that I learned today to my fiction writing. Great. And then it's also like, yeah, I'll go write an essay, a personal essay. Why not? And so that in those 10 days, you sort of get the opportunity to like see how else you want to express yourself. I've always sort of stayed in the lane of young adult fiction. I feel like that's my lane, but it's nice to swerve around when you can.
from poetry, you can learn language, right? There's just so much flexibility to language. And you can learn symbolism, and it's the constraints of it can stretch your writing and your capacity for language in different ways. One of the things I want to talk about with MFAs, it's like there were different categories of students. Like the three of us, we're like I said, we're lifers. We want to do this for the rest of our lives and get better. But there were also, Martin, you pursued an MFA because you want to teach it and you wanted a credential. What other categories or genres of students were there? Like, I kind of wondered if some just like wanted an MFA for whatever reason. I'm not even sure what that means. Like maybe, help them write the novel they all wanted to write, or were some students there for vanity? Were some there for other reasons? What were the not so pleasant reasons that some students were in an MFA program?
There is a category of MFA students, and I clash with these type of students often. And I'm just going to use the term bored housewife. It doesn't necessarily have to be a woman or somebody's wife. But these are people that I feel like that are there because they had a feeling that once their kids finished and went off to college, that they would go back and do something for themselves and publish a book. It's like when you get in a taxi cab and you tell the cabbie that you're a writer, and he's like, oh, I thought about publishing a book when I retire, and you're ready to strangle him for it. I felt that this type of program, especially being low residency, attracted a lot of people in that category, and it drove me up a wall.
But because why? Because it clashed with your seriousness? The fact that you...
Look, I'm an academic at my core, and there needs to be academic... you need to contribute academic value if you're in an academic program. I'm not saying that you have to pioneer new research or new ways of writing or whatnot, but you have to be able to contribute to the academic environment. And these people weren't there to do that. They were there solely for self-fulfillment. And not even self-fulfillment and, oh, I've accomplished this great thing, I went and got a master's degree, good for me. It's the type that's like, I've got something to say, and I found a way to get a captive audience, so here we are. Everybody look at me, everybody listen to me, and that's all I'm going to contribute is me.
I think it's important, too, to say it, like, we're all the pre-COVID MFA graduates. So I'd be so curious now, like, post-COVID, during quarantine and lockdown, everyone who ever thought of writing a book, like, did it. And so I'd be curious now to see what that sort of student body looks like. And then on the other hand, I feel like I took several years off between undergrad and the MFA program, and I am so glad that I did, because I went and lived 5 or 6 years, between different cities, different states, and I like gobbled up all of these life experiences. I could not imagine going right from high school into undergrad, right from undergrad into grad school, because at that point, all you know in your life is school. So I think like I interact with high school students a lot in my job now, and they'll be like, yeah, I eventually want to get a master's degree. And I'm always like, take a few years, go work, go like live your life, because so much of the experiences that I lived between those years, I brought with me to the program. And we had people in the program who they went to high school, then they got their undergrad, then they went right into grad school. And I remember some people being like, yeah, I'm going to get my PhD right after this. And it's just like, you're going to spend all of your 20s in school? Like, there's only so much that like an MFA or a classroom can teach you. Your fiction is boring if you're not out there like living a life, like gobbling up, gaining experiences.
Well, and that fiction's naive as well, right? Because you're still looking at everything through rose-colored lenses. You're 20 years old and your entire life is ahead of you. You've got to get punched in the mouth a couple of times to be able to describe what it feels like to get punched in the mouth. Yes.
And it's like, now mid-30s, I'm like, oh yeah, that was a good choice. And I'd also been like, not saying that I did it completely right, but like I had applied to grad programs right after my undergrad. I'd even gotten into some, and I was like, no, it doesn't feel like the right time. And so, I don't know, I think that plays a huge part in how you show up in the different cohorts of people that are in these grad programs. Because we had a huge age range. Like we had like 22-year-olds in classes with like people in their mid to late 60s and 70s. And it's just like, what a different life.
Sometimes you saw an older person with like so much experience, but they didn't have the talent to bring it to life. But then you saw younger students with all the talent in the world, but they had no life experience in their, to actually apply it to. Because like you said, Martin, like getting punched in the mouth is like, you need to get fired. You need to get your heart broken. You need to fail. Like you need to try and fail. And that's what gives your work it's authority, and it's what readers connect with. Otherwise, if you're just trying to make it up, it just is not going to be as rich and interesting.
Yeah, and it's so much more than like the angsty artist type, right? It's just like, I don't know. If you're not living a life, then you have nothing to write home about. And so for me, a big part of fiction, obviously it's pretend, it's fake, but 95% of my stories, of my ideas, are based off of something that I have experienced in my life. And so the MFA also gives you the skills to like take that and also fictionalize it, so that you're not just like, the fiction isn't just like my autobiography with people's names changed.
Yeah. Anything else to add to that, Martin?
I mean, that's about as clear as you can put it. It's one of those things where the experience has to come from somewhere. And if you try to make up the experience, it's going to come off as inauthentic. We had a young writer in our program, one that, Sam and I were pretty close to. She came to the program just out of college. But one thing she was very good at, she had a very idealistic view of the world still. Very, Disney-esque is what we'll call it. And she'll get a laugh out of that when she hears this. But she knew what she was good at in writing that type of writing, okay? And as a result, she had limited life experience, but what she did have experience in, she was able to apply to the paper. And that's the important thing. You have to know what experience you have and what you're strong at about communicating.
One thing I want to talk about to MFA graduates is the kind of what you experienced versus what you expected. So when you thought about getting into an MFA program, you had a brochure, you had a website that promised you something, and then you finished, or we all have years behind us now, what you actually experienced. So I wonder if there was a gap for you. And I'll just say very quickly, I kind of was a little romantic about it. I kind of thought it was going to be Dead Poet Society, like we all get in a cave and just like read Byron and shit. And I was down. I got, Sam, I think you were there. Like we were around like a fireplace reading some work. I just said, fuck it. Let's start reading something out loud. Yeah. It was fun. I just wanted to be really in it and like extreme about it, I think. But it wasn't like that at all. It wasn't like that at all. I mean, it was almost like high school in some places. Like sometimes you were like, were we even in a writing program? It was people just talking shit and making clicks. And I don't know, man. I just wanted to talk about literature the whole time, but I kind of felt like that would have been like a faux pas. That would have been embarrassing. So I just was trying to be myself.
Well, yeah, but I also think like the three of us gravitated towards each other. Monica, who we all love and admire very deeply and dearly, like we did have those conversations, and it wasn't necessarily like all 30 people in the program like having those conversations, but like just like any, I guess, quasi-social situation, you find the people that you want to spend your time with. And I think we all did that very well. But I will also say I was of a similar mindset where I was like, I actually thought going in that I was going to be like, I knew nothing, like the worst writing that anyone had ever seen. People were going to read it and be like, this chick should give up. And I'm not saying that I was the best person to walk through the program, but I think you go in, anyone who can be like hypercritical of their own work, like you go in with a little bit of nerves and you're like, okay, let's see what happens.
What about you, Martin? What was the gap between what you expected and what you experienced?
Well, I had already finished a master's degree before I took up the MFA. So I had grad school experience. Now, I had considered the school that we did our MFA at, I had considered it for undergraduate and ended up getting into a much, much, much better school. So I went there. But the place kind of never left my mind. I felt more in love with the campus and the program, if I'm being honest. I thought I still had to, throw at Walden Pond kind of thing. Oh, I'm going to go to this kind of bucolic, beautiful, whatever, scenic place, and it's going to help my writing. And just like, both of you said, very cliquey. You've got to find the 2 or 3 people that you're going to grab onto the closest and suck all the energy from that kind of thing. And there was those moments that romanticization that Dustin was talking about was met. There's some of the best conversations I've ever had about writing happened at that program. But it wasn't a 24/7, 10-day long, literary love fest. It was like being at a job a lot of times, which I wasn't expecting. It was a grind. I mean, it reminded me, I played football in high school, and we would go have 3-a-day training camps at one of the church camps down there in Tennessee. And it was a 5-day grind, and that's what it reminded me of, was being back at football camp.
Damn, you went to church football camp?
Well, they rented, so the church owned the property. They rented the property from the church. But yeah, I mean, I grew up in Tennessee, man. We would have like services.
Everything's at church. Yeah.
Everything.
Wow. I think we're just going to have to just conclude the MFA questions right now and just talk about
church.
Yeah, and your football experience. What position did you play?
I was a wide receiver, not a very good one. I played for 3. Dude, I never made it past second or third string. I'm not an athlete in the football sense by any means. But I also ran track and did stuff like that in high school. And football was basically just something for me to do in the fall to stay in shape.
Totally. I played football too. And to just bring it back for a second, actually, I remember football, especially when you're playing in like November and it's freezing cold and you just get hit and everything hurts. Like you feel like you just like shatter. You learn kind of how to take some pain. You learn some resilience and all that. And it helps in writing. A lot of, maybe we can talk about this, a lot of post-workshop feedback, like what you do is you're revising. What comes out of you on first draft, they call it the vomit draft, the big spill. It needs a lot of work. You need many drafts. And like, sometimes like, drawing on my sports background or whatever, Sam, you just ran a marathon. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is an endurance event, writing a book. You feel like you're never going to finish and you have to keep going back to it again and again and again. Even when you're done, you have to go back to it.
I think also I have such a vivid memory of after my first workshop, so my first semester first workshop, the next morning, like waking up at 5 a.m., going and sitting in like the student center and just like reading these notes that I had taken and like starting already to make a revision plan because it's so fresh. You're like in it, so you're so motivated and you so badly want to start working on it. And I just remember like by the time workshop started that day, I was like, cool, I've already been up awake working for 3.5 hours. Like, here we go. But it's just like, that's what you're there for. That's like such the benefit of a low residency MFA. I was a preschool teacher at the time. And I remember like my co-teachers being like, oh, the kids miss you. And just like not even responding to the text because I was like, you're just so in that bubble for 10 days. And then the bubble pops and you're on the bus home back to New York City and you're like, what the hell did I just go through?
I'll say this. When it's good, it's good. As far as, our program goes, I can remember a couple of instances where it wasn't good.
Yeah.
So, Dustin, do you remember I finished up my MFA and came back for 2 postgrad semesters and did a certificate in fiction? And you and I were in a workshop group one of those semesters. It
was the first time because I was an adult and you were in children's or in young adult. And we finally got a chance to be in workshop together, right?
Do you remember the story that I wrote about the woman and the eunuch in the church?
Yeah, it was pretty profane, deliberately so, right? It was, yeah.
Right. And I'm not going to mention names as far as the mentor goes, but in that scene, without getting into too much detail, the eunuch is trying to describe what female anatomy is like. And he has no fucking clue what he's talking about. He doesn't, because he's never been anywhere near a woman. And our workshop leader got highly critical of that work because it's just like, well, that's not what that's like at all. And I'm like, that's kind of the point. And she was in such a hurry to, and we've talked about stuff like this before. It was kind of like, I got to prove how much of a male you are and how chauvinistic you are and how, I'm a feminist and I know this about women and everything else. Even a professional, quote unquote, missed the forest for the trees in that moment. You remember that?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Maybe this is a good time to talk about a topic that I wanted to get to. And I know, Martin, you have some very strong feelings about this. And maybe I'll just say the word wokeness, the woke mind virus, woke ideology, whatever you want to call it. It's the kind of preference for, racial and general bias. It's a certain virtue signaling in one's work or in one's comments. I remember it starting in 2019 when I was in the program and someone brought up the idea of microexpressions, and then it came to land acknowledgments before readings, and then I read a whole story that I had to put feedback on that was, told from the perspective of a trans character. So I was really thrown off by the use of first person plural, they instead of he, she. And I just made a comment like, I just got a little bit confused as a reader. But I noticed that the air got so tense on these topics, because it's like they were very sensitive, and it was a very progressive and good thing to do if you were talking about these types of things and treating them in your work. And it was like this kind of virus just kind of spread, and it spread throughout the literary community, to be honest. Everyone knows this. Not everyone talks about it. So I wonder if that had something to do with your story, Martin, because, it was trendy to say someone was mansplaining or someone didn't know what it was like. Like me, a 42-year-old man couldn't possibly write from the perspective of a woman because I'm not a woman, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, I wonder what you guys think about this topic.
It's tricky. I think, and this is not me blowing smoke, I do think people deserve to be treated with basic dignity and respect. I do believe that if someone has, it always goes back, and the example that I always use for everybody is Muhammad Ali. When he changed his name from Cassius Clay to Muhammad Ali, a lot of people did not want to call him by that name. And I think you have a choice to be called what you want. What you don't have a choice to do is to try to make somebody feel guilty for every little thing that doesn't come out exactly how you think it should come out. And I think there's a lot of that in the literary world. There's a lot of literary apologizing going on right now. And it makes it tough because you almost need like a culture coach or a sensitivity advisor just to put anything down on paper. And at some point, as a creative mind, you just got to say, no, I'm going to do the work that I'm going to do, and to hell with the rest of it. It's the kind of things where you're worried about what you're going to say because you're going to get canceled. Well, if you're not somebody that can be canceled, they can't cancel you. I think there needs to be a reckoning when it comes to this stuff like that. You can't continuously beat people over the head for stuff that, in the grand scheme of things, matter on a micro level, but not really on a macro level. And when we're boiling it down to microaggressions and land acknowledgments in a state where it's not even a discussion about how the state has handled that particular, Native American side of things along those lines, it gets to the point of ridiculousness. It really does. It gets to the point where I truly believe, and this is going to be a hot take, but it's for show. You're trying to show everybody how woke you are.
Like a virtuous, how, you're a good person. You're considering all perspectives. And I found it so weird because I was like, we are creative writers. We're artists. We're the least bigoted people in this part of the, we're sensitive. You literally have to exercise your empathetic abilities to be able to do this correctly. Yeah. So what are we doing here?
I think also words and stories are so powerful. And I think that can be enough. You don't have to put in all these different types of characters if just to say you did it. I remember someone read my manuscript and they were like, well, it's not very diverse. And I was like, okay, that's fine feedback. But also I'm going to write my story and you're going to write your story. And they gave that feedback in a sense of like, it's not very diverse and you still do a good job of like a whole person character. So I think it's like, yes, it's in the literary community, but I mean, I think it's just like a bigger topic in general. Like, why do you have to make it so known that you believe in human rights? Why can't you just like let your writing do the talking?
Yeah, it is part of a broader cultural movement. You know, we don't need to like go crazy here, but like, you know, the progressive far left, they kind of ate culture. They own and dominate culture. They own the movies and TV shows we watch, the commercials. I'm sure, Martin, you could speak on academia. And there's a lot of ink that's been spilt on how it's hard to have a conservative viewpoint, or it's hard to just have like ideological diversity, to kind of just think different or be contradictory, or you're just going to be in big trouble. And I wonder what you think about that.
Well, and that's the discussion I've had with a lot of people. And here's the point where well, personally, I'm going to gently push back on that. But what I will say is this, and I'll say this kind of, my soapbox. The progressive left in America is not the same as the revolutionary left or the working class left or anything like that. Mm-hmm. They have turned identity politics into a weapon. And it's a weapon that allows them to ignore working class politics, which is really kind of the genesis of everything that boils down when it comes to this type of condemnation that comes at all times. There's certain things, obviously, that need to be condemned and condemned loudly. But when you spend all day criticizing everything through the lens of social justice, it's not a benefit to the literary world. It's not a benefit to academia. It's not a benefit to anybody. You're not going to teach anybody anything if you're not going to take the time to teach them. And, you're not going to help anybody learn to write by sitting there and looking at Sam's manuscript and saying, oh, that's not very diverse. It's just kind of like people that say, well, Friends is about 6 white people in New York. Okay, everybody loves Friends. Or people that criticize Seinfeld because, well, first off, Jerry's Jewish. I think all the other actors are too. But above and beyond that, that doesn't change the fact that it's entertainment. And there's plenty of other things to criticize Jerry Seinfeld for, but the fact that his show wasn't diverse enough is not one of them. And if that is the sole takeaway that you're getting from any kind of creative work, then you have my pity, because you're getting nothing from it except for what's going to make you angry.
Yeah. The thing I think I react to so strongly is that I understand there's like a hypocrisy at the base of it, where it's like you can tell that most of the time there's like no interest in actual outcomes or results, whether it's like racial and gender diversity or something like that. It's just fashionable. It's a way to think of yourself as a good person, as a virtuous person. And that's why they call it virtue signaling. And, if you want to, talk about how this land that we're on used to be Native Americans' land, let's give it back.
Yeah, exactly. How much time have you spent with Native Americans? Look, I have degrees from 2 different Native American institutions, all right?
Yeah.
Among all my other accomplishments, which I'm not going to blow smoke up my own ass here, but you get the point. They're on my website, earlsmith.com. My point is, you're perfectly right there, Dustin. You're not returning your land back to the Mohegan tribe. You're not making reparations. You're not sitting here thinking, okay, what can I do to help Native Americans that are in situations like they are now? I'm going to quote the worst piece of media in the history of all media, but for one time it had a good point. Family Guy. There's an episode of Family Guy because they got the doggone Family Guy, and he's super liberal and super progressive, but he really doesn't do shit about it. And one of the conservative characters gives him a lecture about how he's never at the soup kitchen. He only dates women for their bodies, and he talks about all of this stuff. And he doesn't do anything to contribute change to society. You can sit there and talk about stolen land all you want. Second you move out of your condo, I'll believe that you give a shit about stolen land.
The trick I always had is it was so, to me, like nakedly performative, but I somehow had to take it all so seriously because it was like it would be such blasphemy to like push back. And that was always like the kind of ice I was skating on, which is like, come on, you don't really believe this shit. sometimes you think of like certain protests. A lot of people are out there for the right reasons, and they are advocating for certain rights. It's coming from a place of their heart, and that's great. But a movie like Eddington that really kind of like hits this type of performative virtue signaling with a sledgehammer, right? Sometimes you wonder like, hey, if the cameras were off, would you still be doing this?
Yeah, I think it's important, very important to distinguish like some people use writing as a social justice tool.
Right.
And if that is who you are and that's your story to tell, I think that is really great. But then if you're just entering this camp of like, oh shit, like I need to check the box of diversity, and it's not something that you do in your everyday life and you're just doing it because someone told you like your cast of characters needs to be more diverse or your setting needs to be more diverse. From a fiction standpoint, you see right through that.
Yeah, but if you say it out loud, like good luck with that.
Right. But that's also like, that's I guess maybe the downside of like workshop is you have to like, it's political, but you also have to like, if you believe something that you're going to say, you sort of have to stand your ground, knowing that there's going to be pushback.
And that's one thing I'll say about our MFA program and our mentors. The person that I was alluding to aside, I never got that kind of feedback when it came to those issues from any of, not from Laura, not from David, not from Brendan. None of the feedback that I got from that was that. I remember there was another, instance where I was teaching a lesson on Bo Burnham's poetry book because he kind of ripped off Shel Silverstein, but he has a poem in there called Icebuck Sluts. I mentioned that in my thing, and then I ended up getting a 10-minute lecture about using language that was demeaning towards women from the person that was evaluating my lecture. Yeah. And it's like, with all due respect, fuck you. I've been in front of a classroom for 6 years before I even came into this program. I know how to teach. I'm teaching this poem from an academic sense. It's going to require me to say the word slut.
Right. I mean, it's just, it's laughable, but it also comes with these like social costs at the same time, So you have to kind of walk that line. I remember, like, there's a great documentary with Will Ferrell where he goes across country with his old friend who transitioned from a man to a woman. Mm-hmm. And I was like, yes, that's really art. That's beautiful. Like, we are experiencing his transition and how hard it is through the lens of someone who is ignorant about it. Yeah. And he's just being kind, and he's being inquisitive, and he's being supportive. And I thought that was beautiful. And if you tell me a story like that, that's nonfiction. But if you tell me a story like that, I'm going to respond very, very favorably. But if you're just telling a social justice story to make yourself feel better or be fashionable or signal your virtue, it's not going to smell right. It's not going to pass the smell test for me.
Yeah, because you can tell who walks the walk and who is just doing it to check the box.
But also, this shit sells right now, Like, what books are being... Yeah, so it's like, it's not just... There's, like, economic incentives here, right? Because an agent has to pitch a book to an acquisition editor, and everybody... It's about money. This is about money, making money. So what's going to play well right now? Well, I mean, diverse forces. And it's obviously like, how could you possibly not think that I'm right now in the same part of my mind thinking this is wonderful in the name of representation? Right. So many voices haven't been out there. This is great. This is awesome. But there's been a bit of a pendulum swinging to the other side where there's economic incentive to, the movie American Fiction played with this really well. And just how the kind of like hypocrisy to it all.
I think that's the hypocrisy, because I think we can all agree that we need diverse books, especially for kids and teenagers. Like, they need to see a wide range of characters to see themselves on the page. But we don't need to, like, that doesn't have to be why you sit down to write a story. If that's why you sit down to write a story about diverse characters, my opinion is that you're not the person to write it.
And if something is good and something is natural, those themes will often come out in the work. If the story is meant to show somebody in a diverse category in a positive light, then as long as the story's good enough, that's all it's going to do. I wrote a book about Che Guevara, a children's book. Not once did I mention he's Argentinian, he's from Latin American. I never mentioned his gender identity. I never mentioned his race. I barely mentioned his politics because it was part of the story. I didn't talk about socioeconomics. I told a story about two friends that rode a motorcycle across South America or Latin America. And it's a good story. And those stories will come out and those themes will come out when you do it. But if you're trying to do it just for the sake of doing it, like Sam said, it's going to feel artificial. And that's the thing that you got to keep in mind, especially when you're doing writing for children and young adults. Kids have an incredibly good bullshit detector. They're going to know when they're being pandered to. And they're going to set it down, and they're going to move on to something that they can relate more closely to.
I think that's just good writing advice in general. If you're going to sit down to write a story, like, make it authentic to yourself. That's how, it doesn't have to be autobiographical by any means, but like, I don't know, maybe this is just how my brain works, but I'm not going to sit down and write a story about a very wealthy girl that grew up on the Upper East Side of New York. That was not my experience growing up. And I think what makes my writing so good, so that is my strength. My strength is pulling from my own story, my own past, or the stories of others that I've witnessed. If someone is being genuine on the page, you want to read that. If someone's just putting words down to like come across as like brilliant or so switched on, like so for the people, you see right through it and you're like, okay, we get it. Like, go start a TikTok account and like share videos about that. I'm all set.
Oh, goodness. It's extremely frustrating for me because ultimately, at the end of the day, there's a finite amount of time that we have to create. And if you're wasting your time trying to create something that's going to make absolutely everybody happy, then you're going to make nobody happy. And it's not going to be good work. It's not going to be good work. Yeah.
I remember one of the guys, I'll just say his name, Al Leftwich.
I love Al.
Al was just like a very comforting, almost paternal presence in workshop. Mm-hmm. Always had great things to say. Always very intelligent. He used to be like in the government, I think it was. He was an attaché or something. Yeah. And guy's like legit, you know. Yeah. And you wouldn't like know it because he's just so like wholesome and friendly. But I remember he used to write stories about the South, the Bayou, and he wrote a story about a young girl getting ensnared in like an ICE raid or an immigration situation. And the teacher said, you know, what are you writing about a young girl for? Like, you're a 67-year-old guy. And, you know, he was kind of like, oh, but I've seen this and stuff. But there is a point there, you know, it's not your experience and whatever. But I remember saying to him, like, to your point, Sam, I remember saying, like, dude, write about the government. Yeah. He told me, I guess, I don't know, off the record or at lunch or something, he told me that he knew a whole hell of a lot about one of the biggest spies, a Cuban spy who infiltrated like the highest levels of American government. And I was like, why is that not in workshop? You know, like, dude, that shit's awesome. And so we kind of sometimes have he'd have to run it through the Pentagon and stuff. There's all sorts of crazy shit you have to do.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's going to be a white van waiting for us outside.
There's all these risks. I feel like when you're writing about social justice, you think you're taking like risks, and maybe you are. Like, maybe they're emotional risks, but like, take actual risks. Like, that's your personal experience, and it's dangerous. And it's going to be very interesting because you're letting people into this like secret world that you were a part of. Like, tell me that story.
Yeah. I think also, like, from a writing perspective, you have to really love and care about your characters because you're going to spend a lot of time with them, especially if you're writing a novel. We've all written novels. We know that it's not a 1-month thing and then you're done. You have to like your ideas, your characters, your settings, you have to invest yourself in them. And so that like, whenever people are like, I really want to write a book, where should I start? Where do you get your ideas? That's a very common question. Where do you get your ideas? And it's just like, I can't teach someone how to think of a plot or think of a character relationship. I can help you get from the beginning to the end if you have this, even if it's just like a little baby spark of an idea, just take it and go with it. I guess if we were to be giving advice on like, how do I sit down and write a book?
That's an interesting point too, like in the context of MFAs. Like I wonder, Martin, what you think about this is that you can have a long conversation about what MFAs teach, right? They teach craft. They don't really teach business. They don't really teach the business, literally publishing side of things. But they also don't really teach you how to be creative.
Yeah.
Because being an artist or whatever, it's kind of like a disposition. It's kind of like an attitude. It's kind of like a personality type. You got to be a little bit crazy, you know? Your mind is always going. The gears are always going. You're always thinking things up and turning them over in your head. And you got to have the guts to kind of like throw it down.
I've always referred to it as a vocation. It's like if you're going to be a priest for the right reasons or a religious, spiritual, guide or whatever, you have to just know that's what you are. Some people just know that they're going to be car mechanics. Some people just know that they're going to get into finance or whatever. And some people are just creative. You just have to know that about yourself. I can't, to both of your point, and it's a beautiful point, I can't teach you how to come up with a fucking story. If you don't know what your story is, then what are we talking about? And no MFA program is going to teach that, because if you can get to an MFA program and you don't know what your story is, you're not going to be in an MFA program for long. And I think we can all think of examples of that went through our program. And there's people that, even though if the stories were bad or the stories that we didn't like, at least they had a story and they knew where to go with it. You can work with that. But you can't tell somebody how to be creative. You just are.
Yeah, I went into the program with I think, kind of interesting background where I was one of maybe the only people there that had always wanted to be a writer. Like I've wanted to be a writer since I was a kid. Like you could go back in my 3rd grade yearbook. It says, when I grow up, I'm going to be ... It was a writer was always the answer. And so you going into a program where like some people had like lived full careers and now they're coming back to this or starting this from the beginning. It's such an interesting dynamic. But when you meet people who like to their core, they're just like, I just want to tell stories. Like those are the people that you like latch onto and you learn a lot from, because you're learning from their experience, but you're also learning from how they approach storytelling. I mean, I like I said, I have a very creative background. I did professional theater, did all of that before even getting the MFA. So it's like I'd been around those creative types my whole life. It's different when you like put a name to it and you put a degree to it, a very expensive piece of paper to it.
Very, very expensive degree.
So the big question is, do you need an MFA? You want to be a writer. You want to publish. Do you need one or do you not need one?
Stephen King doesn't have a fucking MFA.
He does not. And I don't think Hemingway went through an MFA program. Fitzgerald.
I mean, they were going through, like, they were dealing with some of the best writers in the world at places like Princeton, so I don't want to discount that. But I was published before I ever stepped onto campus, and there are other people that were the same way. You don't need an MFA. It's really helpful if you want to teach writing, because it kind of gives you that, okay, this person has went through the slog. To be a great writer, you absolutely do not need to be an MFA. Some of the most brilliant people that I know have never set foot in a college classroom. I'll give you a perfect example. There's a sports journalist that I follow in new media. His name is John Boyce. We call him John Bois. He does a lot of creative stuff for a YouTube channel called Secret Base. And he's one of the most viewed sports journalists on YouTube of all time. And all he has is a high school diploma. But he's creative. He knows how to write what he knows And there was nothing in our MFA program that was going to make him a better writer. I will say that without hesitation. And that's not a knock against the program. You just either have it or you don't. You don't need an MFA to be a good writer.
I agree. You can't teach someone how to get good ideas. You can't teach someone how to have voice. I think I don't regret going through the program. I don't regret the degree. I think it led to a lot of story things were unlocked for me in those 2 years. I will say maybe my misconception was I was going to walk out of there with connections to have an agent upon graduation, with connections to like publish. And they don't talk about that. Like I graduated in 2021, and then it took me 2 more years after that to get my first book published. And that is not like an uncommon story. I think the days of like you walk off the graduation stage and onto the New York Times bestsellers list, like don't go into the program thinking that. But I think if anyone is wanting to do it, it's not going to teach you to be a writer, but it's going to give you a lot of tools to unlock and enhance the skills you already have. I don't think you can teach someone to be a writer. I think you are born with it or you develop it along the way. I don't think you can say, sit down and write a novel. I don't think it works that way.
Yeah, the one thing I really loved about the program was that you had to read so much. So part of your time away from the residencies was you put together a reading list. And so you'd have to read like 10, 15 novels. And I did. I read everything from, I really enjoyed Edgar Allan Poe. I just felt it was very dramatic and entertaining. I read a lot of like the existential writers, Albert Camus and Kafka and stuff. And that kind of like gave me a new vibration to my own work. I started to lean more into like narrative summary and like, I think just exposing myself to all that literature in a very intense spurt was good medicine for me. I wonder sometimes like if an MFA can teach you how to tell a story, because I think that's what the three of us are pretty good at. Like, you can be good with language, and I met a lot of people in the program who were good with language. I could kind of give a shit about language. I'm here to tell you a story and move you. I want to convey information through that story, and I want it to have structure. I want to throw you in the river, and you're going to go down the river, and you're going to keep turning pages. I want it to have a propulsive quality. So one of the things I learned was I need to study character. I need to develop character better and make them more multidimensional and things like that. So yeah, at the end of the day, I think we're just telling each other stories, and you can learn Freytag's Pyramid and you can learn the hero's journey and so on and so forth. But there's some people, you mentioned the sports writer, Martin, Mitch Albom in Tuesdays with Morrie and all his other books. He never got an MFA. He was a sports journalist he just knows how to tell a story.
Yeah. Some people just have it. They just have that storytelling ability. And like you said, Dustin, like all of the reading that you do in the MFA program, that is probably something I maybe wouldn't have done if I weren't in the program. I'm an avid reader. I love to read. But would I sit down with a Morgan Matson novel and like deconstruct the chapters and the words and the characters? Probably not. I would just sit down on a beach chair and read and enjoy it. Yeah. And so it took me a while to get back to reading for enjoyment.
I've never recovered.
Yeah.
And no, I was that way before. I was pulling apart Michael Crichton books for years.
Yeah.
Oh, what'd he do there? How'd he open? What's the hook? And like how does he dramatize scientific information? How does he blend fact and fiction? And our director said, you'll never be able to read fiction again after this program. I was like, I'm already there, dear. Like,
and I'm going to be honest, guys. It's probably been 2 years since I picked up a book and read it cover to cover. It's been that long. Now, I do a lot of new media. I watch a lot of television stuff on Netflix or Amazon Prime or whatever. Blended journalism, like on YouTube and stuff like that. I've gotten to be very visual with a lot of media that I have. But we spent so much time deconstructing books that we loved, books that we hated, books that we'd never heard of before. I won't say it's killed the joy in me as a reader, because I still think that if something's good enough, I can read it. But I think that's one thing that an MFA program does do, is that it completely, radically changes how you're going to read anything for the rest of your life.
100%. And the whole point is it makes you read your work more closely. And to kind of get that bullshit detector, I have a novel coming out in a few months, and I'm going through the final proofs now. And I had this book, it's a novella, it's 160 pages. This book was done, laid out, done PDF. And I had 182 comments on the PDF. Delete this word, change this sentence. It wasn't typos. It was reading it very, very closely and saying, on page 32, you said this. And on page 157, you said this, and they don't line up. Or you're repetitive here. Or would she really say it this way? Or can I say it a little bit shorter? This is done material. This isn't like in a Word document first draft. And I just went over it again, and I have 28 comments. So it just never ends. And it's because you become a close reader, you smell your own bullshit, and you learn to spot what readers will react to.
But it's also like you started writing that book 5 years ago.
5 years. Yeah.
So much has happened in your life in 5 years. I had the same experience. I was at a reading of my published book, and I was reading it out loud. And in my head, I'm like, oh my God, you got to change that. And I'm like, too late. It's already out there. I was 27 when I started that book.
Right. Sometimes the very premise is adolescent.
Yeah.
And you realize that now you're an adult.
Yeah.
And you don't even respond to the concept anymore, but you got to see it through.
I have one of my best friends is a high school English teacher, and she texted me the other day. She's like, one of my students is reading your book right now, and I just get to sit at my desk and watch her read it. And it like made me a little emotional to hear her tell me that. And she was like, she has to write, we do 10 minutes independent reading each class, and then they have to, in their journals, write 2 sentences about what they just read. And she was like, I just looked at her journal and it said, Morgan is starting to realize the truth about Bailey. And that was always what I dreamed of. I write for children and young adults so that children and young adults read it. And so for my friend to give me that like front row access to this 9th grader who's like reading it and enjoying it and freaking out and like flipping out about what's happening, like that's why you do it. Okay, that's enough to like get me through another 6 months of this manuscript that I'm currently working on.
Yeah, I remember, David, you read a short story that I wrote in the program where it really was a departure for me in terms of style. I remember, Martin, you were in workshop with me, and I think you read some of the Empathy Academy, and it was very sort of action-driven. It was very commercial writing, a lot of dialogue and all that. And then you read, I think, the Healing book or A Case of Aphantasia. I can't remember which one it was. More influenced by Poe and a lot of Kafka, to be honest. Mm-hmm. And I remember Camus' Stranger really had, so I really kind of like, I told the story more like it had like a folklore-ish feel to it. It was like, had this sweeping quality. It was a lot of narrative summary. I deliberately tried not to use dialogue, which is just wild. I like nested the dialogue into the narration, and it felt so experimental and interesting to me. I was like, how can I tell this story the way I want to tell it, like from around a campfire? How do I just put a spell on you? And I remember I wrote that story, and then you said something I'll never forget, Martin, in workshop. You said, I like A Case of Aphantasia 10 times more than I like the Empathy Academy. And it wasn't even a compliment. It was an anthropological observation. You were just like, dude, that's you.
I remember exactly what I said. I said, this is Kafka's The Hunger Artist if The Hunger Artist was good.
Oh, shit.
That's exactly what I said. But you're right, those were my exact words. This is Dustin, and the other stuff is Dustin trying to write like Michael Crichton.
Exactly. You got it. And that's why the MFA program worked for me. Because what I did was I said, dude, you're not Michael Crichton. That guy got a fucking Harvard MD. And he was a, different guy. And That's what you do in the MFA program is you break with your models. You break with your heroes and idols. All artists, I don't care if you're painting, dancing, writing, whatever, filmmaking especially, you mimic your models. You copy them. It's the way it always happens. It's the way it's always going to be. But in the MFA program for me, I broke away from my model and I became who I found my voice. And that is the greatest compliment I can give to our program is that I found my voice. And that, goddammit, was worth $20,000.
It's so funny. People are always, they ask me two questions. They're like, number one, I want to write a book. Or they say, I want to write a book. What should I do? Or they say, I want to run a marathon. What should I do? And my answer for both of those is like, well, do you enjoy it? If you don't enjoy reading, you're not going to enjoy writing a book. If you don't enjoy running, you're sure as hell not going to enjoy 26 miles of it. It's about discipline, and the MFA program taught us even more discipline because I would argue that the three of us already went into the program very disciplined with our work ethic, our jobs, our lives. But like you said, it also it almost gives you permission to be like, okay, yeah, we get it. You love Sarah Dessen. Great, go ahead, write a book like Sarah Dessen, yeah. And then it gives you the permission to break away from it.
And that's what teachers and Martin, that's what you helped for me is it's to give you permission to be yourself. And it actually takes a hell of a long time as an artist to be who you are.
I think even to this day, I'm still, I've got how many manuscripts under my belt. Each new one I sit down, I'm like, oh shit, you know what? Yeah, I guess I have been doing that. Let me try it this way.
This undiscovered territory. Yeah.
That's what I love so much about writing. And that's what I loved so much about the MFA program is that you just in this headspace to play, to have fun. If you don't have fun writing, if you don't have fun creating, go work a 9-to-5. Go back to your desk job.
The other thing I wanted to say, too, is that when you go to an MFA program, we're talking about the ROI, why spend the money, right? Yeah. So one of the ROIs is, find your voice and whatever, but it's also to find your people, and those people can expose you to different processes for actually making art. Mm-hmm. And one of the things what rubbed off on me from you, Sam, is that you write without an outline, and when I came into the program, I wrote with outlines. So my first two novels I self-published, and they had very long outlines. And then I started to write without an outline. And A Case of Aphantasia was written by the seat of my pants without an outline. I just sat down and did it. And that was fun. Because when I came into the program, I kind of felt like I was a little stale. I felt like I wasn't having any fun. I wasn't even sure if I loved this shit anymore. Because it's hard. That's something I feel like artistic and writers, they don't say it enough, but it is fun. And I think what's fun about it, why you keep doing it, is because the discovery process is actually really satisfying. Oh yeah, I surprised myself. Or, man, that felt good to kind of be in that place of uncertainty and just break through. Find a creative solution and stuff like that. It just feels good. And that's what keeps you going back.
I think of Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn, and I'm like, that was so fun to read. I bet she had so much fun writing it because that is such a twisty book. Yeah. And I remember when I was I don't write with an outline. I remember the majority of people being like, you're nuts. This girl's nuts.
Yeah, because how do you build in the twists and how do you keep things straight?
Because the second you come to the point where that twist is going to be, it goes right down on paper. You're like, here's what I'm going to do right here.
Yes.
And then you do it.
Yes. I mean, my first drafts are garbage. I have to go back and fluff them up and add in twists and turns here and there. But if I know how it's going to start and I know how it's going to end, everything in between that, it's just me and my computer, and I'm having a lot of fun creating and doing. And if you don't love and have fun with what you do, not just writing, everything in your life, you're going to feel stale. You're going to feel like it's work. I don't feel like I'm working when I sit down to write. It feels like it's not a hobby because I take it very seriously, but it's enjoyable.
I tell you what, though, revisions fucking work, Even
then, though, you're like, oh, man, I go through and as I'm writing the first draft, I like make a list of things that I already know in the back of my head I'm going to have to go back and tackle. And then when you get to go back and tackle it and like, you're like, okay, this is like manageable because I already did the hard part. Like the idea is already fleshed out.
True, but it's hard in a different way.
The characters are already
now.
there. It's hard in a different way for sure. That definitely feels more work than fun, but storytelling is fun. Fiction is entertainment.
That's what Kurt Vonnegut said. He's like, we're just entertaining. You've got to entertain the reader.
Yeah. And whether you write fiction for adults, fiction for children, kids are picking up books at the beginning of their lives because teachers are telling them you have to go home and read for 15 minutes a day. But a good book is enough to make a child a lifelong reader. And a good book is enough to make an adult who hasn't picked up a book in 10 years fall back in love with reading.
And it's also enough to help find out who the next writers are going to be. And that's kind of part of it, too. Everybody has that work where they read it and they're like, you know what, I could do this. I want to do this. Here's my idea. Let's see how I'm going to do it. And that right there, it's something I enjoy as a professor, is that I'll have a student in my class and they'll write something good and I'll give them feedback and it's that aha moment. And you're like, okay, this person's going to do a little bit more than almost everybody else in the class because that switch flipped for them.
There's a lot I kind of felt like we could talk about what's potentially like broken about the MFA model, and do MFA programs hurt literature by creating like a homogenized style? You know, I think there's those very interesting conversations. And if you want to say anything about it, please do.
The problems that we see in MFA programs are reflective of the problems that we're seeing in wider academia. The people that we were talking about earlier that are there because, you know, they're just trying to show off or they're doing it for themselves or something like that. You're telling people for $20,000 that you can come in and we'll teach you how to be a writer. And you get the kind of people that are arrogant enough to believe that they're going to become a writer just because they were in an MFA program. A lot of the MFA programs, I hate to say this, unfortunately, are diploma mill-ish in the sense that you're handing people a degree, an MFA that says that they can write and that they can create, and they really can't do either one. And you know, the cost of these MFA programs, and, you know, I'm glad I've got my MFA. I'm never going to get the return on investment that I invested in getting it, but I'm glad I've got it. But these are huge boosts to the bottom line. I remember hearing somewhere, and I'm going to be vague about saying this, but the institution where we did our MFA program, that program contributed something like 60 or 70% of the tuition dollars that came into the program that were paid cash, not financial aid, Pell Grants, student loans, stuff like that. Most of the money that came in that was hard cash came from students in the MFA program because it's a different type of learner. You've created a product to meet the needs of a certain class of people, whether that's professionals like me that want to do this or people that just need their ego stroked. And I would say professionals and include everybody in this conversation, obviously. You're putting together people that are there for the right reasons and people that are there for the wrong reasons, but the institution doesn't care. At the end of the day, that $20,000 check is going to clear before the semester starts, and they can pay administration fees. They can pay members of staff that don't necessarily need to be there. We can name examples of that. Load salaries of those administrations. And it ends up being something that is just hand over fist a money pot as opposed to being about learning the craft of writing.
Yeah, and it ends up being kind of a burden on the peers and the faculty, because if someone's in there because they're not prepared or they're not serious, you kind of have to. That's kind of a burden. Yeah, I sometimes wondered if some students should have just kind of not just gone and done something a little different, because what did we do? Yeah.
Well, and also you don't. If you want to learn more about writing, that's great. You don't need an MFA to do it. Yeah,
No.
Go to any bookstore and say, "Hey, I'd like to learn more about writing. Can you show me where your craft books are?" Go pick up On Writing by Stephen King, Sandra Schofield's The Last Draft.
Yeah, also I say
Fiction,
George
writing
Saunders'
fiction,
book
yeah.
on writing fiction is awesome. It's like a swim in the pond in the rain.
Yeah.
That's my best plug. Yeah.
Do that, because Martin, you've got a good point where, like, you know, unless you have the cash or unless you're willing and able to swallow that student loan debt, it's a barrier. And that I mean, don't get me on my soapbox about how higher ed the financial barriers of higher ed, but you've got a great point. Like, you don't have to get an MFA to enhance your craft. Go buy a craft book. Go to the bookstore and say, these are my 3 favorite authors. Can you recommend more authors similar to them? Read all their books.
My biggest advice is go live.
Go live a life.
And
yeah.
there's like a famous quote by, I can't remember who it was. It was like, go be a prison guard, go fishing in China, like, live your life. Hemingway wrote about war, fucking guy got shot at. Tell me about that. That shit's rich. So yeah, if you could get an MFA or live deeply, definitely live.
Do the Tim McGraw song, Live Like You're Dying. Go skydiving.
Or is it that James Hetfield said, choose to live, not exist? That's exactly what it is.
Martin, before we wrap up, it occurs to me that you might have some other things rattling around inside you that you want to say about MFAs. If you want to do it, let's go. Like, what other things have you been thinking about that you've always wanted to say?
First off, I kick myself for this. I think as an educator, you've got to be, and I was kind of hinting at this earlier, sometimes we just need to be able to look at students and be like, why are you here? You're wasting your time. You're wasting. And I've had this happen in composition classes. I've had people that have been in college that don't want to be there, have no business being there. And I've told them, I said, look, if you're not invested in this, go do something else. Do not begrudge you. And it's an argument that I've had in higher education. Every profession is important. You don't have to be in a classroom and get a college degree in order to add value to society or to learn. And when you take these MFA programs and you want to root them in quote-unquote social justice, and you want to root them in let's try to find a way to both milk as much money out of the students as we can and have diversity for the sake of diversity. And it was bad at our program there for a while. It was bad. And it was celebrated how quote-unquote diverse it was. Well, it was diversity for the sake of being diversity. If that's the bedrock of your program is going to be gone in 10 years. Focus needs to be on the craft, and everything else will come. As long as you've got a cohort that's willing to be creative and they're focused on the craft, everything else will come.
I think we can leave it there unless you have something else to say, Sam.
No, I'm going to take my own advice, and I'm not going to talk just to hear myself talk. Shut it down.
You guys are awesome. Thank you for coming on to talk about this topic. I kind of felt like we could go for another 3 hours. It's just a lot there, Sam Cooke, Martin Smith, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Dustin.
Thanks for
Bye,
having me.
Martin.
Bye, Sam. Bye. I'll talk
See
to
you,
you guys
Martin.
soon, okay?
See you soon.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Curiously. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Sam Cooke and Martin Smith. If you enjoyed this episode, consider sharing it and starting a conversation of your own. If you've got a minute, I've got a new survey up, and I'd love your feedback on the show. Just head to curiouslypod.com/survey. I'll read every response, and there's a good chance your feedback will shape future episodes. Thanks again for listening, and stay tuned for more conversations with people I meet along the way.